All right. Welcome back to Recruiters in the Microphone, the video sessions. So excited about this. Obviously, Pete Cochran, and joined by my co-host, Israel Swanson. Yep. And then we have now a special guest with us today, hailing all the way from Gainesville, Florida, Pablo. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Pete.
Absolutely, man. Love to have you. So kind of just kick this off, right? Can you give us a little background, where you're originally from, what got you, what brought you to Gainesville, and all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff? Just this is skinny on who you are.
yeah, totally. So I was born and raised in Miami, Florida.
Hey, so
Two
was
immigrant
I.
parents. There you go.
Yep.
So my dad is from Bogota, Colombia. My mom is from Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic,
Okay.
and they met in Miami. And I grew up down there. So my parents worked really hard growing up. Struggled through the financial crisis as well,
Mm-hmm.
and was always fascinated by the world of entrepreneurship, but had really no mentors, nobody to guide me in that direction, nobody in the family who had built companies. So I was fortunate enough to get into University of Florida, barely made it in. I was ranked 100 out of 400 students in my class. I was the lowest ranked student to get into UF. And
Heck of an accomplishment there, Pablo. Yeah.
Hey,
yeah,
he got you got in.
You
You
got
got
in.
into
That
a phenomenal university.
that
Go
is true.
Gators.
go
Yes.
Gators. Yeah, with a 2.9 GPA. So once I got up there, I was part of this program called the Innovation Academy, which allowed me to really get into this world that I was always fascinated by. But growing up, my parents, being immigrants, always wanted me to have job security, and so they really pushed me, saying, business is not a real career. You should be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And so I ended up being an engineering major.
Sounds
But
like my dad.
thankfully,
That's it. There's three
I
jobs.
believe
You only
it.
got three jobs. Everything else is a joke. So don't do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started this program, and then it allowed me to really get more into, actually pursuing some of the ideas that I had. So eventually, by my third year, I had started a company. It was a marketing agency called Rutex. We were just
Mm-hmm.
doing like content marketing. We got into publishing. We worked with a lot of local tech startups here in Gainesville. Along that time, I had met my now co-founder and partner, Justice, through the Entrepreneurship Club at University of Florida. And we started hosting these little meetups for founders because, at the time we were students building our own companies,
Right.
and we were trying to find resources. We were trying to find people to help guide us in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't really anybody or any programs or places that we could go to where we were like, oh, this is like really helping us and
Right.
guiding us on the right path. So we said, well, let's just build it ourselves. So we started hosting meetups. That turned into executive roundtables, workshops. And next thing you know, we're hosting the largest tech events in the North Central Florida region. And then the pandemic happened, and that changed everything for us. So
Yep.
we
Been
ended up
there.
launching an accelerator. We helped 40
Yep.
companies raise over $13 million in 2 years. One of them got acquired. At that point, we looked at ourselves and said, hey, this has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work, but we haven't gotten any equity and any cash for this. How do we start getting equity in these companies? And that's what really changed the game for us. We asked a lot of the VC firms that we were sourcing deals for if we could get a scout fee or a finder's fee. And they pretty much all told us no. And at that point, we're like, all right, well, let's just raise our own funds. Not knowing what we were getting ourselves into, both 26 years old at the time. And
Wow.
today we have a venture capital firm about to close out Fund 1, start raising Fund 2. We're managing $3 million, have 15 portfolio companies. And we've invested in 3 Gator-led companies and hoping to do many more in the coming years. So, yeah.
That's amazing to actually be able to in that short period of time to do that. Because I mean, I know, so I guess my first question is the Innovation Academy that was and is still, I would assume, still part of Florida. Had
It
that
is.
been around for a while? Because I know back then when you and I met those years ago when we did the innovation book, that was the innovation hub was just being built. It was awesome. And now since then, right, 2020, like Gainesville's it's a tech center. Like it's an amazing city down there with the technology that's coming out of it.
Oh, yeah. It's really developed quite a bit. And, you got the Innovation Hub downtown. The
Right.
Innovation Academy is actually a program for students, it's similar to the Honors College in the sense that, like, you're all part of this one, like, cohort, but you all have, like, different majors and stuff. And then everybody
Mm.
has to get a minor in innovation. And then there's, like, a living learning community. So you can all, like, you'll all could live like the first 2 years like in the dorms and get to know the community. So it was
How many students are a part of it now?
It's back when I was in it, it was like 300 to 400. I think now it's like 200 every year.
Wow.
And yeah, you really get to know the students that are in it because you have the classes together every semester. And yeah, it was really great for me.
So like example, sorry to Israel, example of like what would be like a typical class that you would take in the innovation group with that course?
That's a great question. Yeah. So the first two classes are about creativity. So one of them is like creativity, which is like, it's more theoretical, and they go over like, things that Steve Jobs would do, and like even poets and artists and how they worked and how they operated. And then the second class is actually like creativity in action. And that one, you're actually supposed to like build a prototype and create like a pitch. And by the end, and it's only a 6-week course. So by the end of it, you have to do, it's called Catalyst. And they bring in judges from all over town, like real entrepreneurs, investors. And they will go, like, usually they do it like Emerson Alumni Hall. And so the judges will walk around, and it's like a startup showcase in a way. So you have to like show off your prototype, pitch these investors, and you're like a freshman doing this stuff. So like, it was super cool to be able to do that so early on. And, these types of things like really, really gave me a lot of energy and like excitement about just getting into this world of like 0 to 1. Like you could have an idea and bring it into reality, and then, talk to people about it, and maybe something comes of it. So I really enjoyed those classes, and it was a good start for me. And also, some of the people in the program are very entrepreneurial, so you really get to know these people. And one of my friends was the president of the entrepreneurship club, and he was kind of pushing me like, "Hey, come out to these meetings, check this out. Like, we got this speaker coming in." And next thing you know, I become like really involved with the club, and yeah, met some really great people.
Some stuff away from the classroom too, right? So it's more
Absolutely.
like even real world stuff.
Oh yeah.
So did I know from an entrepreneurial standpoint, one of the the key fundamentals of anyone's success is they always have, or everyone's always talked about, this mentor, or like this book that, and who recommended the book? Oh, my mentor. It's always like, there's this mentor path that, this sensei, if you will. So you get to Gainesville, you are a freshman, you don't know anybody. I had the pleasure of meeting your co-partner at the last shindig that you threw, and there's a lot of big names there. Like, there was some very impressive people. But all that to say, so you meet Justice, you're in this group now. Was there someone, had you met someone that could have been somewhat of a mentor, not just a professor or a new student, person that's guiding and aiding and abetting you? But it's like, so where did your first mentor come into place in that timeline, and how impactful was that to either the journey that you and Justice were already on, just as not even partners yet, just friends that are doing something, or did it come later of like, oh wow, does that make sense in all my rambling?
Yeah. So it's actually pretty interesting because my entrepreneurial journey really didn't start until my junior year. And the reason is because I was dead set on being an engineer, because that's what I had been programmed to be,
That's
from
what
early
Dad
age.
said to do.
Yeah.
I'm staying on that
path. So yeah. After my first 2 years, I get my first internship at a Fortune 50 company called Pratt & Whitney. And I'm up in Maine for a fall, because Innovation Academy is a spring-summer schedule. So I'm spending the fall up there. And after 1 month, I'm miserable. I'm like, I'm never going to be an engineer. I never want to work 9 to 5. And I never want to work for a corporation. So at that point, I like, hey, I have to start all over anyways. Why don't I just shoot for the moon? Why don't I just start my own company? Like, not knowing anything. And I actually did it. I was just like, I came up with an idea. Within a month, I had like website up, I had a logo, and I had my first gig lined up. And that was my marketing company. So I fast forward, I get back to UF in the spring, and I immediately joined the entrepreneurship club, start meeting people. And then that's where things the flywheel starts to kick off, right? But
Okay.
where the mentor first comes into play is during my last semester at UF. It was the spring of 2017, where I took this class. You had to apply to get in, and it was called entrepreneurial leadership, something like that. And it was co-taught by Dr. Brian Ray and Martin Schaffel. Martin Schaffel was the one who became my mentor. And it was funny because we were organizing these trips and events for founders, and so I actually missed the first class of that semester because I was in Vegas for CES, which is the world's largest consumer electronics trade show. And, having been a college student for a long time, I'm like, syllabus week, I can miss a class, no big deal. And I get a call like the next day, and it's like Dr. Brian Ray, and he's like, "Hey, you need to have like a very legitimate excuse, or you're being kicked out of the class." And I'm like, "Whoa, like this is like really serious." Like, and I explained like I'm at this conference, I like apologized, blah blah blah. Like came in person, met them.
That's an intimidating
and,
phone call to get. Yeah.
I'm like, this is the class I was most excited to take.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, I meet Marty on the first day I get to class. I meet him, and I tell him I was at CES. He'd been to CES tons of times because of the company he built. He built a company called AVISPL, Audio Visual Innovations. And they became the largest in the world for audio visual equipment for boardrooms, classrooms, conference rooms. So you think about like Disney, the military, University of Florida. They're the ones who install all the AV equipment, and they scaled it to hundreds of millions in revenue.
Wow.
He was 100% shareholder in the company, which is unheard of for a company of that scale.
Yeah.
So this guy is like one of very few in the world to accomplish something like this. And so I get in his class, and I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm like loving it, just like the stuff that I'm learning. He's teaching from stories, like the moment that his company
almost went bankrupt.
Yeah. He's telling stories how like he got a call, like he lost he's about to lose his largest supplier, gets into his hotel room and has a panic attack and like almost like dies, and like this story about like how he closed a Disney contract and beat all his competitors just by leveraging a BlackBerry that had just come out and nobody had the tech yet. It's just like all these crazy stories that you never forget these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you really learn. And so anyways, he took us under his wing and he invited us to this really exclusive event in Tampa. And this is just less than a month into the class. Like I became a closest student to him. And so he invited me, and I brought along, Justice and a couple of like our entrepreneur friends, maybe like 5 or 6 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden we're like 22, 23 years old in a room with like these billionaires, all these guys who built like 9-figure companies, the founder of Florida Medical Clinic, founder of Coast Dental, founder of Go Outdoors, which sold for 160 million. And we're just like so inspired and like learning so much. And I remember being on that car ride back. It was just like this feeling of like, wow, like this is insane. Like these people are like legends, like, and they're just humans. Like, we could do this too. So I said, we got to do something. Like, we can't pretend this didn't just happen. And so we replicated the event that they did in Tampa. And we basically said, we're going to start doing this in Gainesville to build the community. And that's what really kickstarted it. Or that's the origin story of OneSixOne, really. But Marty was pivotal in all, like OneSixOne would not exist without him, because what he did was he empowered us. He would show up to our events, he would support, but he made it very clear from day one, this is your thing. And you guys are running this. I'm not, if I can't make it one day, this needs to keep running. And it did.
That's the whole definition of a leader, right? To get out of the way, support you. You stand on my shoulders, I stand on your shoulders. We're here together. It's not me. Just
and there's a few things that we took away. I've sat in on probably more classes that Marty's taught than anybody else, because to this day, like, I mean, I'm not even kidding. Like literally last week, or is it this week, he brought in the former CFO of Tech Data, which became TD SYNNEX. Company does $60 billion a year in revenue. And he literally just had the CFO come up and speak. So I'm like, I'm going to go to this class. I'm going to freaking learn. Like,
I'm on my way.
So anyways, there's a lot of lessons that we've learned from Marty that we apply every single day in building OneSixOne Ventures. And it's been a game changer for us.
What's
So
like?
I
Yeah,
guess
go ahead.
go ahead, Pete.
No, go ahead.
Well, so you have this entrepreneurial class, and now you have this mentor. And when did and I'll just start talking to you, but then also including Justice. So when did you and Justice have that Aldersgate aha, where it's like instead of us creating a product or being a part of like marketing and that whole thing, where you went into the investment route, where it's like, oh, wait, we can go the VC route. We can learn and understand that, and then now not only are we helping ourselves, but we're also helping these other entrepreneurs by helping and having a part in their product and helping them, chase that success. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So, for us, it happened very organically. And Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, has a really good essay about this. He says that some of the biggest companies started almost as a nonprofit in the early days. They were trying to solve a really big problem. But if they had started as a for-profit, they wouldn't have made it anywhere because it would have been too much to take on. And and that's very much true for me and Justice. We knew very little about venture capital when we started hosting events. And, gradually these events started to evolve from backyard meetups to roundtables to penthouse cocktail events to, workshops. And it was just growing. And then the pandemic hit, and that really forced us to rethink what we were doing. And so we kind of pivoted and we're like, how can we continue to support founders in a virtual capacity? Now, meanwhile, this whole time, we're not making any money off this. Actually, we're putting money into it because every event is costing us money. We have to buy, pizza or whatever, drinks or whatever it is. And so, we get to this pivotal moment and we're like, all right, let's keep helping founders. So we launched this accelerator, and we didn't think we were going to have this kind of success, but we ended up helping 40 companies raise 13 million in 2 years. And while this is happening, we're thinking, well, we're not getting any equity here. And these companies, these VCs are investing millions of dollars. So like, how do we get
all the help that you gave them along the way, which is probably absolutely instrumental, you don't see any of it. Like, it's great. Glad that I introduced you to somebody, but man, I guess I'll see you in the funny papers, see you out there. Yeah.
Is my handshake not worth anything that I
I mean, it's actually pretty crazy. Like, we even had a firm that we sourced the top performing deal in their portfolio. And like, if you go on their website, it's the number one deal highlighted. They talk about it like crazy. This company's now making more than 25 million a month in revenue. And at the time when we first sourced the deal for them, we got a call from their marketing director, and they were like, hey, we just sent you a press release. We'd love to get your feedback on the press release before we send it out. And then also, once it gets published tomorrow, we'd love for you to share it on LinkedIn if you can. I'm like, yeah, I'd be happy to. I just read through it. It looks really great. I was just wondering if you could include that you guys got access to that deal through the OneSixOne Ventures Accelerator program. And they're like, oh, no, it's actually like too late to make any edits. I'm like, wait, so why were you asking, for feedback if you can't make any edits? So it was like these like simple little things, and we realized we had to, if we wanted to actually get a piece of the action, we had to take control of our own destiny. We had to have our own capital and write our own checks. And that's what led us down a path of like, and it's really a crazy story because the traditional path is you build a company, have an exit, and then you have a big network and you have a lot of money and you raise a fund. But we had neither. And we just went after it, and it was absolutely brutal. But I think the key is that we had a lot of grit and resilience, and we weren't willing to give up or say no. And we eventually, got 0 to 1.
Yeah. And what I respected about, go ahead, Israel.
And I'll swear, Pete, you get the next
one.
No,
it's okay.
So I guess the funny thing to me is, so when you and Justice were not making any money doing it, I would like to know, you have no necessary skin in the game because it's almost like, it is a charitable philanthropic thing. It's like, oh yeah, we'll help you out. Of course, I'll introduce you to this or that. So then all of a sudden, you've had this pivot, you've turned, and now you and Justice are for profit trying to figure that out. How much harder, or how from a mental brain situation, now you are dealing with money. Now it is exchanging of currency. And so how different is that prior to the philanthropic? Yeah, we had grit, we were doing it, we were helping people, and all of a sudden people have given us money, we've raised money, we're making money. How much different is it, the timeline in you and Justice's approach to be like, whoa, no, we're not introducing that handshake, because prior you might have. It's like, oh, we'll introduce you to everybody, but now it's like, no. We've got 3 people, not 5, not 10. We've got 3 people that we've already personally vetted. But I guess my question is, how much change occurred within you and Justice as you approached now being for profit in the company, making that tilt on how you approach those deals or those handshakes in introductions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So in some ways, a lot has changed. In some ways, nothing has changed. So, on one end, we aim to be the most value add investors on the cap table. So if we've invested in a company, then we're going to try to make as many introductions as possible for them. And, going back to our roots of how we started, now we're hosting bigger and better events than ever before. Tech summits from Miami to University of Florida to Seattle. And that serves as a platform for our portfolio companies to present on and get more customers in front of more investors. So now we have more leverage to be able to help these companies. Now, when it comes to like just random companies that we're meeting, because like the accelerator, we were taking in, 10 companies at once, and we were just meeting them like one interview, one call. Mm-hmm. And so now it's a little bit different. Like if we haven't invested in a company, we don't have the bandwidth to be able to make 5 or 10 introductions for somebody that we just met. We'll try to support as much as we can, especially like University of Florida, like the different ecosystems that we're part of. We want to help those founders, but we have constrained, like we're limited. We have limited bandwidth, and there's only so much that we can do. And we've got to put our time and energy in places that we know we'll be able to scale and will bring a lot of long-term value. So yeah, it's like, I think also the bar is higher too. Like over time, we've refined our criteria. Like the accelerator taught us so many lessons about, what do the great founders have and what do the not so great founders have in common. And so now it's like, if we're fully sold on somebody, like even if we're not bought into what they're building particularly or the market that they're in, if we think this person's an absolute rock star, then we're going to do whatever we can to help them. Because at some point, whether it's this company or the next company, they're going to build something that's going to be massive. And we want to be somewhat a part of their journey, or at least have access to the opportunity when the time is right. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So I assumed that same element of what you said. So going back to your time in Tampa and seeing somewhat, quote unquote, an accelerator program, then to build that in Gainesville, which you'd never done that before. And that's what I respect most about you, Pablo. You've done so many things in your career that you've never done before, which I think it's something that I always kind of tell people is like, challenge yourself as much as possible. Whether or not you know it, learn as you go. And you've always inspired me with that. But going back to now, I'm assuming that have you reformatted the accelerator program with the people that you've now invested in, and how have you improved it over time? Because I'm just kind of curious on that, because I've gone through an accelerator program myself, and I do remember learning a lot, but I remember like you going through 10, like so many different cohorts. I can't imagine what happened the first time compared to what's happening, a month ago.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great question. And the reality is that things have shifted quite a bit. So we're no longer running that original accelerator program. Now, what we do have is a similar program that was inspired by that one that we run at University of Florida every fall. And that's called the Startup Launch Competition. It's open to all UF students. And, the bar is a little lower for that because these are student founders. And, some of them are starting their first companies with zero experience.
Right.
And so the goal is it's really an educational platform for them. So, we'll teach every week, and the 3 student-run companies that get the most traction throughout the fall semester, they get to pitch. And we bring in real VCs from all over the state to be judges. And then the winner, we give them $10,000 as a grant, non-dilutive funding. So that is a program that we're running that was inspired by that original program. Now, as far as how we're working with companies today, it's a little bit different. One thing that we realized is as an accelerator, you do have some challenges, especially when you're working with so many companies at once. It clogs up your bandwidth, and it doesn't give you the ability to see new opportunities as much or do new things as much. And so we shifted more towards this events model where we're now doing tech summits almost every single month. And to us, this is like our version of an accelerator. If you're a company in our ecosystem and, we're interested in working with you, we're giving you free VIP tickets to all of our events. If we're very interested in investing, you're going to present at one of our events. You're going to speak at one of our events. We're going to give you a great opportunity to get exposure, to get in front of customers, get in front of other investors. And, whether we've invested or not yet. And this actually has happened with multiple companies. We have two companies in Seattle that presented at events that we hosted before we even invested. But we were very interested. And for us, it was like that give first mentality, How do we create value for you before we've even written you a check, before we're even partners? Let's give value up front. And that way, we become very aligned. And they want
you
us
get that
to
trust.
have
That trust more, because this guy gave you money doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be there for the long haul. If I give you something like to your point up front, before I even write you a check, you're going to have more value back to me. I'm going to have more value back to you.
One thing to keep in mind is that the best founders, they have every investor trying to give them money, and they get to pick and choose who they take money from. And so as a VC firm, especially as a newer VC firm with limited resources, how do we differentiate and how do we stand out? And that's the way we're doing it is through these events.
So I know we're coming up on time because I know we kind of had a pretty hard stop, but I'm going to ask one last question, then Israel, I'll pass it on to you to ask one last question, and then we'll kind of wrap up, Pablo. But I asked this to a lot of the previous interviewers with us, but as you have been an entrepreneur pretty much your entire life and your entire career, what is the number one advice that you would give to somebody that's even thinking about entrepreneurship in general? Maybe they're 8. It's like Jordan Walker talking about how he was 8 years old peddling lemonade on a golf course, which is a great story. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it.
No, he was peddling beers.
He was peddling beers. Yeah, he got the beers, but he started with lemonade. So that's trying to make sure that he doesn't get arrested. But the number one advice that you give to somebody that's actually thinking about taking the leap and being an entrepreneur themselves.
Number one advice is stop thinking and start doing. Steve Jobs said this better than anybody else. The real thinkers of our generation are the doers. And it's because you don't learn anything from sitting around and doing research and writing business plans and strategizing. You learn by actually doing. It's like working out. You have to get those reps in, and there's no substitute for that.
Yep.
So the reality is, if you're interested in building a company, you need to start today or tomorrow at the very latest.
Yep.
Because the longer you postpone it, the longer that the less likelihood you're going to succeed. I mean, Warren Buffett said this, right? The biggest indicator of success is how early you start. And, in the sense, like, he's done an incredible job leveraging the compound effect.
Right.
And so the earlier you start, the more time you have to leverage the compound effect. And like me and Justice, like, we both just turned 30, and now we're starting to see the fruits of the compound effect already. And it's incredible to think about what we can build over the next 30 years if we continue to build on this and leverage the compound effect. So stop thinking, start doing.
Awesome. Swanson.
And then I guess, I was able to go to your event last month? Or was it
2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I guess this is more of a geographical hump that you and Justice potentially had to get over, because from starting a VC firm in Gainesville, Florida, of all places, when everybody knows that Silicon Valley and, New York, whatever, those are your big boys, right? And Florida's not even really on the map of like, oh. So obviously you and Justice were even starting these events and participating in kind of that approach of just building community before you even ventured out to the VC world, right? So would you say that how long, I guess, in your venture, because you are a very young guy, and Justice is also a very young guy, which I think could also play pros and cons. So it's like, oh, these two young dudes from Gainesville, Florida, think that they're gonna start something, but then at the same time, you're doing these events, and people are seeing the authenticity within you and Justice. But timeline-wise, in the short amount of time that you've been doing this and the success that you have already achieved, what would you say was that biggest hump in the beginning as you're making a name for yourself and not having the geographical credentials of where everybody else, the bigger pond, if you will? So what was the biggest hurdle that you had to jump over in putting Gainesville on the map and having people come to Gainesville? And I mean, the one gentleman, I forgot his name, that was speaking, and half the guys that were up there, I'm like Googling them. I'm like, this guy just sold his company for $1.4 billion. Like, what? It's just like,
here he is coming out to Alachua County. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, how did Justice and Pablo pull this guy? As he's like, oh, and then he's up there and he's like, oh, I love Justice. Oh, Pablo, it's like, what? I mean, I called Pete. I'm like, yeah. I don't get it. Like, I mean, I met Pablo before. He's a great guy, but like, seriously, like there's some, anyway, so that's my question.
There. Yeah. So it's a great question. Obviously, there's a lot of obstacles we had to overcome in the early stages, and being, two 26-year-old kids, and having never managed money, never had a job in venture capital before, never worked for an accelerator before, and just throwing ourselves into the fire. Most people just wrote us off immediately. And, we did get some early commitments from people who knew us for a long time and saw what we'd been building. Thankfully, we had their support. But we even went to, like, an example is, like, we went to the managing director of UF Ventures in the early days to pitch him. And this is already after we have some commitments. And he literally told us, he's like, you're not going to raise a fund. He said, you guys should go start a company. And maybe after you sell a company, then you can raise a fund. And,
hold on, not to throw UF Ventures under the bus here, and I know we only got a few more minutes. Weren't they the same ones that also passed on Gatorade? Is that a true story too? Like when Gatorade first started, University of Florida didn't actually buy in. It's a little bit different because So it's an interesting analogy. So UF Ventures didn't exist. So Gatorade is actually what started the whole tech licensing, tech transfer office, UF Innovate, all of that started because of Gatorade. Yeah.
Back in the 80s or something. So yeah, but yeah, it's pretty funny, right? Like that's how it happens. And then so he saw that we were executing, right? Mm-hmm. We hit a wall with fundraising. We raised like $500,000. We had our first close. We're like, cool, like this is the hardest capital we'll ever have to raise. The rest is gonna fly. That was completely far off from the truth.
Like wrong.
So, wrong. Yeah. We literally like took the foot off the pedal on fundraising. We're like, okay, let's run another cohort for the accelerator. Let's find some deals. Let's make some investments. And then a couple months later, we start trying to fundraise again. And the market was here when we started raising. And when we started raising again, it was here. It had crashed. It was just like not a good time to raise for funds or for startups. So we hit a wall. And I think when your back's against the wall and you're completely determined, that's when you think the clearest. And you have to agree with that. So I had this insight, and it was, instead of telling people what we're going to do, let's show them. And that's when we brought the events back. So we hadn't done any events in almost 2 years because of the pandemic. And within 5 weeks, we planned the first Gainesville Tech Week, which we ended up raising $12,000 in sponsorships, had over 600 people who registered across 3 days, 7 events. It was insane what we pulled off. Like, I can't believe we did that in a matter of 5 weeks. We had never raised $1 of sponsorship funds for any other event before that event. And after that, it worked perfect. The execution was perfect. We literally brought in speakers. They were like, what you're doing is amazing. Within a month, like 2 of them invested in the fund. And it was just a game changer. And we're like, all right, we need to start doing bigger, better events as often as possible. And now we have this whole like events company on the side. I mean, this is going to generate like $300,000 in revenue in 2024. And but more importantly, we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it for the deal flow. We're doing it for the access. We're doing it for the caliber of tech leaders and investors that we're connecting with, and all of that. So it's
You're just
completely
giving them a
changed the
platform. You're
trajectory of
getting them a medium.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what
Also,
I want.
what better way for us to build our reputation and credibility, being two young fund managers from an untraditional background, than to bring to a stage founders of multi-billion-dollar companies,
Yeah.
founders of companies that are publicly traded, investors that are managing billions of dollars to speak at our events. And then, thankfully, a lot of them will say very nice things about us too in front of the audience. And so it just builds credibility at scale for us, which makes the best founders want to work with us. And it also makes a lot of really good investors want to work with us.
Yeah, that's incredible. That is incredible. Well, I love your story, Pablo. You know that you got a fanboy in me, my friend. So anything that I can do for you, and obviously a huge fan of the Gainesville tech scene as well. So can't wait to get back down there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're hosting Gainesville Tech Week in 2 weeks. I mean, we're hosting Startup Hour in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Which is just going to be like a mixer. It'll be like a 3-hour event downtown, and then we're hosting Gainesville Tech Week in February, and that'll be a big one as well. So
cool. We'll be there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for your support, and thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
You guys have a great weekend. Signing off.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.